All right, the open review session is now open. So let me know any questions that you might have, things that you might want to see. Basically, anything that you need in order to make sure that we are ready to go for the upcoming exam on Tuesday. Okay, so the question was, how do we know when to use a sample or when to use population calculations? And this is going to be for, at this point, for the standard deviation or for the variance. So the easy answer for that is in the exam. It's going to be all sample. And furthermore, in the exam, it will say calculate standard deviation for a sample, or here is a sample of scores. But in general, unless you are specifically told that you're dealing with population data, you will usually only have access to a sample. So, and usually in any question, they will have to tell you, here's the data from the population, here's the data from the sample. But beyond this course, unless you are dealing with a highly specialized population, of which there are only a few people in this world. So if I was dealing with autistic savants who can draw landscapes from memory, there's probably there's 3 that I know of. Maybe there's only 7 of those types of people in the world. If I could get all 7, I'm dealing with a population. I'm dealing with everybody that is an autistic savant with those visual abilities. Most of the times in the real world, you're dealing with a sample. Importantly, for everybody, for the exam, you will be dealing with samples. There was a question about what we did last time, which was the Z-scores. So I'm going to, whoops, wrong one. I'm going to pop that up, and I'll go over it one more time. So let's start. Let's do number 2 over here. Oops, too much. Number 2. So there's a number of different ways to do this. So if you found a way that works for you, feel free. But one of the most straightforward ways to do the Z-scores is to set up a structure that allows you to copy and paste all the way down. That basically puts all of your scores in one column, all of your means in another column, all of your standard deviations in a third column, so that every single row has the information that you want. So in order to do that, one way to do that is you can calculate your mean, and you can calculate your standard deviation for your samples here. And we have for the mean, we got equals average, open parentheses, and for the standard deviation equals STDEV. This is a sample, so we know that, just to kind of bring it back to the first question, we know that because number 2 says given the following sample of n equals 15 scores, n is the number of scores, we got 15 scores, but we know it's a sample. Because of that, we don't use .p, we just use STDEV. So now we got the 2 components that we need for our z-scores, right? Because the z-score is going to be equal to the score minus the mean, the sample mean, all divided by the sample standard deviation. So we have the score, we have the mean, we have the sample standard deviation, but we don't have it yet in a way that we can copy and paste things very easily. So there's a number of different ways to do this in Excel, some more complicated than the other. This one is rather straightforward. What you want to do is the same way that you have 15 rows of X scores, you want to make 15 rows of means, you want to make 15 rows of standard deviation so that everything is parallel. So we don't want to write in just 56.13 for the mean, because even though that's what it says down there, that's not what it actually is, and there is a ton of rounding error if you just enter it in manually. So rather than that, where we have the incorrect mean, we're going to use that equals function, and you make your top row equal to the mean that you just calculated. So the first move is you make your top row equal to the mean that you calculated. The next move is usually where students will trip up if they do this incorrectly. The next move is to make your second row equal to your first row. And what this is telling Excel is make my second row equal to the row above. And when we hit enter, we can see that it made that second row equal to the row above. And then once we have that, make that second row equal to the row above formula, that is the formula we copy and paste. Because that is going to tell Excel, make this row equal to the one above. So when we copy and paste it, in row 3, it makes it equal to row 2. Row 4, make it equal to row 3. Row 5, make it equal to row 4. And then if you develop those little shortcuts, you can do that all the way down, cascading waterfall of equals, and now we have the mean all set up in a column. We do the exact same thing for the standard deviation. So we make that first row equals to the standard deviation that we calculated. And we use that equals because we do not want to introduce any rounding error. And then we make that second row, and that's the important part, we make the second row equal to the first. And then we copy and paste that second row function. Make the row equal to the one above. Whoops. Make the row equal to the one above. Make the row equal to the one above. And then we can copy and paste that all the way down. And we have an entire row of standard deviations. The reason that is so helpful is that because when we calculate our z-score there, we need to calculate using the calculation the raw score. We have that in that top row. We need to calculate the mean. We have that in that top row. We need to calculate the standard deviation. We have that in that top row. So if we choose equals, open parentheses, the score, minus the mean, all divided by, and we use our arrows to get to that standard deviation. If we enter in the formula for the z-scores, we can calculate that z-score for that first x score, for that score of 59. Notice when we double click on this, that everything that it accesses is in the same row. So that when we copy it and move it a row down, it's going to access everything one row down. And because we set it up correctly, that is exactly what we're looking for. So now when we copy and paste our z-score function all the way down, it's always looking for these three numbers to its left. And if you double click on it, you can see that it's still accessing the score, the mean, and the standard deviation. And that's why we're able to copy and paste this all the way down to calculate our z-scores. We're going to double check this by calculating the mean and the standard deviation. We can copy and paste those functions themselves. And we can see that our mean is equal to 0. Our standard deviation is equal to 1. Again, it's just a quick double click to make sure that we're accessing the right cells there. That gives us confidence. We enter in our z-scores into our answer cells. We can copy and paste that all the way down, and we got those answers correct. So it's a very quick way so that you don't have to enter in your z-score formula over and over and over again. You can take advantage of Excel's copy and paste functions, and but only if you set that structure up correctly. And again, you do that by using that cascading waterfall of equals. And the key is, while the first row is equal to wherever you calculated your mean and your standard deviation, the second row is equal to the first. That's the key move. Make that second row equal to the first row, and then you can copy and paste that second row all the way down. All right, and while we're here, we'll check out, I'll just quickly go through the standardized score. So the standardized score is where you retrieve a new raw score. So you're going to get a new standardized x score. So we're just going to call that new x. And that is going to be equal to, the formula for this is the mean that you want plus the z-score multiplied by the standard deviation that you want. So for a standardized score, the mean is going to have to be given to you, and the standard deviation is going to have to be given to you. You are literally being told, transform your z-scores into this new standardized distribution, and I'll tell you what mean I want, and I'll tell you what standard deviation I want. So we're going to call that stand x, and for that we use again this function, and we have our mean. In this case, question 2b says create a new standardized score with a mean of 50 and a standard deviation of 25. So we start off with our mean 50. We can enter that in directly because it's given to us in the question. There's no cells to highlight. So we can type in 50 plus the z-score that you calculated for your original scores multiplied by the standard deviation. And we get 52.87 for that first score. So again, it's equals the mean of 50 plus your standard deviations your z-score multiplied by your standard deviations. And once again, because the numbers that we're accessing are in the same row, we can take that formula, copy and paste it all the way down. And we can then double check these scores by finding the mean and finding the standard deviation. The mean is equal to 50. That's exactly what the standardized score wanted. The mean is equal, the standard deviation is equal to 25. Again, that's exactly what was required. So this gives us confidence that we got it correctly. We got it correct, I mean. We enter it into our answer cells, copy and paste it all the way down. And notice that even though Excel is only displaying down to the ones, the answer is still being graded as correct, and that's because even if Excel doesn't display it, that does not mean that the entire number is not there. And you can get to it using those up here near the top of the screen, increase decimal or decrease decimal buttons to basically have as many or as little decimals as you want. That doesn't change the number, it just changes how many numbers are displayed. So be sure in the test, in the exam, be sure to double check this when you're doing your exam, because especially in the standardized scores, I'm not entirely sure why, but oftentimes students just get those incorrect. And oftentimes the ones that do get them incorrect, I find that that calculation for the mean and the standard deviation is missing. So if you did it incorrect, let's say that you were here and you just put in 5 instead of 50. Let's say that you were just entering in that formula and it was 5 instead of 50 and you did that all the way down. It doesn't take too long to basically double check and say, oh no, that's a mean of 5. I wanted a mean of 50. Clearly something has gone wrong. Let's go back and check out the formula. And then you go to the formula and you realize, oh, I put in a 5 instead of 50. Let me change that. Now I just put in a 590 instead of 50. Let me change that. But again, it's a nice indication. A slip of the finger can occur at any point, right? So I just had one right there. I put in 590 instead of 50. If I didn't catch that and I copied and pasted it all the way down, those standardized scores might look completely fine to me. Until I do the descriptive statistics, take a look at the mean, take a look at the standard deviation, and that will very quickly tell you if you've gone wrong somewhere. So be sure to do that for your standardized scores. And also for your z-scores. But it does pop up more often as an issue for the standardized scores. All right, since we're in between questions, this would also be a good time just to mention some strategies for the exam. So when, a couple of things about that. When we, once the exam is done and it's been graded, I will upload the corrected exams to your Canvas account in that assignment. So you're going to hand it in through Canvas. There's going to be an assignment tab where you will upload your completed Excel sheet. So do know how to, or figure out before Tuesday, how to save your Excel sheet either on a USB drive or somewhere on the computer that you're using, and then attach that to and submit it as a Canvas assignment. So know how to do that. I will take it up in class after the exam so that you know one more look at how to do those particular types of questions. When I take it up, if I was to do like a speed run on this exam, I could probably do the whole thing in 15 minutes if I didn't make any errors, and 20 minutes for sure if I did. So that's not bragging, but that is to say that when you're doing your exam, to actually type it out and put in the information and do that, that's going to take about, let's say that you're slower than me, that's going to take about maybe 40 minutes tops to actually input the things that you need to input for the exam. You got an hour and 15 minutes to do this. That means that you have at least 35 minutes to think about stuff. So you're going to see students in this class walk out of this exam after about half an hour, 40 minutes because they're done, because things were immediately apparent in terms of what they need to do. If you cannot think immediately what to do, know that you have that open book format. You know, go and jog your memory, take a look at your notes, make yourself notes, right? Up until this point, when you've been doing your homework, when you've been doing the demos, you'll know yourself what you're rock solid on, and you'll know yourself what you might be struggling a little bit on. Make notes for the sections that you're struggling with, but what you do not need to do, absolutely do not need to do, is try to go through this exam quickly and make errors because of it. So I have seen students who I know, taking a look at their answers, I know that they were just grabbing any numbers that they could possibly find in that question and trying to plug them into any formula that they could possibly use for that question, and they got those questions wrong. So just be aware that this is not a kind of speed exam. You will have enough time to kind of sit down in front of a question and say, all right, what's being asked? What do I need to do here? You know, let me think about the pitfalls, you know, that Dr. Yurichevich mentioned before. And again, just, you know, take your time going through the exam. Other things. If Excel ever does something weird to you, so if, for example, you get that hashtag thing, I don't know if I'm going to get it here because, come on, nope. All right, there, okay, so if something like that happens, and Excel does something weird to you, a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, stop, don't do anything else, because I can always go there and Control Z to undo any craziness that might have occurred. But if you go too many moves deep, I can't do that. So you'd be amazed how many things can be fixed with Control Z. I've had students call me over and they would say something like, oh my gosh, I accidentally deleted all the raw scores. I don't know where my raw scores are. Can you help me? And I will come by and say, yeah, absolutely. Here we go. Boom. They're back. Problem fixed. So don't panic. Call me over. Most of the times I will be able to fix it. So don't even, I would say, don't even take time out of your exam to try to fix it for more than a few seconds. So if Excel does something with you that is weird and you don't immediately know how to deal with it, call me over. I'll come by. If you got the hashtags, I will be more than willing to say, oh, your answer's there. Here you go. Right? If you deleted something, I'll be more than willing to come there and say, oh, let me get that back for you, Control Z. I will try to fix your Excel problem for you. If I come there and it's part of the question, then I can't, I won't be able to help you with that, but I'll let you know. So if you call me over and you say something like, oh, I have all my columns set up, but I can't remember how to do that trick you did to enter in the entire column of values, I will be more than willing to say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. That's part of the question. But basically, let me make that decision. If you're at all wondering, is this part of the question or did Excel go wonky on me? just call me over and I'll let you know. And, whoops, I just saved this one. Not what I wanted to do. All right, got some deleting to do later. But anyways, I will let you know, and I'll try to fix Excel for you. Other things, take advantage of the open book format. Like I mentioned before, you know what you have down rock solid. You know what you might be struggling with. So if you're having a hard time remembering, what's the formula for sum of squared deviations? If you got tricked with that sum SQ formula before when you were doing your demo practice, make a note of it. Bring in those kind of step-by-step notes for yourself, and do what you need to do to prepare to do well on this first exam. Because like I mentioned before, it is not going to be a surprise in terms of what you see on this exam. So there's going to be order of operation questions. Make sure that you remember the order of operations and the pitfalls, the kind of insidious traps that are out there that students oftentimes get tripped up on. You're going to have to read frequency tables and frequency distributions. So it's not going to be a spoiler to let you know that you are going to have a table of scores and a frequency of scores, right? So you might have a table like this, right? It's not going to be too surprising when I ask you, calculate the sum of the scores, right? Take your time. Remember what I mentioned about this, because I have seen too many students, and I want to get it down to 0 on this exam. I've seen too many students start their exam and think, and it will be in order of what we covered. So order of operations is going to be the first question. But I've seen too many students start the exam, and they're like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? Sum of x. What does that mean? Don't have time. We're not going to think about it. I need to find an x. There's an x. I know what sum is. All right, 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. That's 9, 10, 15. 15 is the answer. 15 is not the answer. That's totally wrong. Because they didn't take time to think about it, they didn't make notes for themselves, and they grabbed the first thing that they saw that could possibly maybe be the correct answer. Remember that in this case, you have to read your frequency distribution table and say, this, I remember Professor Yudishvili mentioned, these are not the actual scores. These are the possible scores. These are the frequency of those scores. So when I'm summing up x, I have to go 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 4 times, plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 3 times, plus 2 2 times, no plus 3s because that's got a frequency of 0, plus 4 once, plus 5 once, and then this is the actual sum of the scores. So, it's a very important concept. Summation is a very important concept. Frequency tables, very important tool in statistics. You will see a frequency table. I will ask you the sum of the scores. You will see a frequency graph. I will ask you the sum of the scores. Do not make that mistake where you just look for an x. Hopefully you have now been reading this as sigma x or sum of x, but sum of the scores. Don't make that mistake. Take your time. Think about exactly what you need to do, because again, the exam is designed to be completed straight through in about 40 minutes, which means that if you have to think about it, which I'm expecting a lot of students at this stage will need to, you got time. You have 35 minutes to just kind of sit there and say, what should I do here? What's the correct move? Oh, of course. I remember possible scores, not actual scores. Silly me. Let me unpack it the way that we need to. All right, so just some additional kind of tips for the upcoming exam.
I have 2 questions. So on the quiz, there's a bunch of vocabulary terms. Are you going to be asking questions like that?
No. So the question was that on some of the quizzes there were vocabulary terms. Will those be on the exam? Answer is no. So the exam is going to be purely computational. So the only time that you're going to need to remember terms is because I will ask you for those specific things. So I'll ask you to calculate the mean, calculate the median, calculate the mode. You'll be asked to calculate the sum of square deviations. So those you'll need to recognize. But there won't be anything in terms of like, what is the sum of square deviations? It is A, this, it is B, this. There won't be anything like that. And you said there was another one?
Yes, it's on Excel though.
Okay.
In my previous class, the other professor, the one that I said I didn't understand the way teaching, it was Thursday.
Okay.
He had a way of, like for the frequency, I can't remember how he did it. There was a way he could like make a histogram of it, and I cannot find it anywhere. But I wanted to see if you knew where that was.
Yes. So you mean for creating a table? Yeah. So there is a way to create a frequency table in Excel. I have used it before. I need to YouTube it every single time that I do use it because it is messed up and it is weird. And you have to know how to define bins, and you have to know how to define an array. And once you do it, if you made a mistake, you cannot go back in and change it. It is not very user-friendly. So on this exam, you will not be creating frequency tables.
Okay.
You'll be reading frequency tables. So we don't need that for this exam. And if you do need that in any sort of outside classes, I would highly recommend find a YouTube tutorial because I know I've done it before. I use it to automatically create frequency tables so I can assess grades in my classes. But I've copied and pasted those Excel sheets so many times that I would definitely have to, just re-get that knowledge. But yeah, but it won't be on. You will not be creating tables. You will not be creating graphs on the exam. You will be reading from tables and reading from graphs. So keep that. All right, so that is it for the open review session. So next class, in class, we will have exam. It'll be in the other room. And like I said, in between now and then, anything that you need, anything that you want to make, step-by-step little guides, whatever you want to bring to the exam, feel free. It's just whether or not you can get it done, not whether or not you memorized it. Other than that, I will see you next time.